Hello, and welcome to Supplement 1 of Super Deep Movie Analysis. I'm Lec Zorn, joined by guest co-host Michelle Gussow, and in this episode we're going to be super deep analyzing the two trailers of the upcoming Rocky sequel titled Creed. And in case you missed it, episodes 4 through 9 of the show are of these previous 6 Rocky movies in chronological order. And in preparation for Creed, we decided to also include the 2 trailers, and occasionally we will put out supplements like this for trailers, and then other bits that we want to talk about other than simply our usual super deep movie analysis. So anyway, it's October now, so I'm wearing long sleeves for the first time all year, and also being in October means that next month, finally, the Creed movie comes out. I've been looking forward to it for a year and a half now since I first read about it. And the first trailer came out about 3 months ago, and then the second trailer came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, Michelle, what do you think of the trailers?
Well, what's really interesting is, the first trailer came out obviously with no, I'm going to say foresight that there'd be a second trailer, so let's put it that way. And my first reaction was, and I know you talk about little hints that are in it, but trailers go by kind of fast, and unless you've got a real trained eye for that detail, you don't pick up on it.
Yeah.
I didn't know or realize it was part of the Rockying until you actually see Stallone.
Yeah.
And they're talking about that picture of Rocky and Creed. And so I kind of looked at it like that, kind of sideways, thinking, I'm really excited about the movie coming out, but I actually do wish that the trailer would grab me more or be more indicative or look more like it was going to be a Rocky movie.
Yes.
And when I finally saw the second trailer, that was the trailer I would have liked to have seen the first time. And if just putting it kind of in perspective, the first one, if it wasn't for me being such a fan of the Rocky series, that trailer really wouldn't have encouraged me to go see the film, whereas the second trailer would have.
Well, that's a fair assessment, and of course, I don't know if they intended for there to be 2 trailers or not. Maybe they didn't get a good enough reaction to the first one, so they issued the second one. I don't know. It's not uncommon for movies, major movies, to have more than 1 trailer.
Right.
But nevertheless, I think it's interesting, going back to the first one, that it's almost like just tries to lure you in slowly to the realization that this is related to the Rocky series. You start off by seeing Michael B. Jordan, who plays Apollo's son, warming up for a boxing match in a locker room. And so you see it's a boxing movie right off the bat, since that's, that's the first thing you see. And then you see a train going by, which could be anywhere where they have a train track.
Right.
But then you see an overpass that has Eagles in big letters, so it includes Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
So then but again, a lot of movies are set in Philadelphia, and then you see him walk into Mighty Mick's gym.
Right.
And so that's the first clue that this is, Rocky related. And then you see somebody an unidentified character, saying, telling the Michael B. Jordan character, "Your daddy died in the ring," and then you see, then you hear, amid the scenes of the in and out of boxing. You hear the Jordan character say that, I've been fighting my whole life. I didn't have a choice, and you don't know what he's talking about. And then you see him, and you can't tell. It's not really overt, but if you look in the background, you can see an Adrian's restaurant sign. Of course, you have to read it backwards because it's it's from it's an interior shot looking out, but it is there, and apparently it's the same location they used for the restaurant in Rocky Balboa 9 years ago. And then you see a picture of Rocky fighting Apollo, and then he says this is from the 10th round of the first fight, and then you see that he's talking to somebody, but you don't see his face. You see him from behind, and finally he said, "I hear you and Apollo had a third fight behind closed doors. Is that true?" And then that's when you see Stallone's face. He goes, "How do you know all this?"
Right.
And then that's finally when Jordan's character reveals, "I'm his son," and then you don't really then you see a lot more clips, again, some boxing related, some not, but you don't hear much dialogue except near the end that Jordan quotes a great fighter once said, "It ain't about how hard you hit it, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." And then finally at the end, Rocky, while looking at the mirror in the gym, says, he points to Jordan in the mirror and says, "This is the toughest guy you're ever going to face. I think that's true in the ring. I think that's true in life." And so, I mean, obviously seeing that and of course the thing is with me, I knew about Creed, the movie, about a year and a half ago when it was first announced to the public. And in fact, I actually remember when I first told you about it, it was when we were up at Ball State for the matchbreaker for that shooting.
Considering things for the film shoot.
Yeah.
Let's not say the shooting.
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah. It's film terminology. Sometimes I forget that people who are watching this don't know all the behind the scenes, words and phrases. But yeah, that's what we mean when we say shooting. We don't mean this kind. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's when we were filming the matchbreaker. I'll put it in a way that leaves less room for misinterpretations. Well, yeah, and at that time there were only 3 people on the IMDb page listed among the cast: Stallone, Jordan, and then Burt Young, who, as we will get to later, now is no longer there. Very sadly, I was sorry to hear that. But yeah, Burt Young originally was on the IMDb page for it, playing Paulie. And another thing that's interesting is that before you see Stallone in this trailer, it says from the director of Fruitvale Station. That's Ryan Coogler. And I've never seen Fruitvale Station. I'd never heard of it, actually, but I looked it up after that. And I found out that the director of this Creed movie, Ryan Coogler, he's a 29-year-old black man from Oakland, California. Fruitvale Station from 2013 was his first feature that he directed. It was not a huge hit, but it was widely critically acclaimed. It's also one of the most profitable movies, major studio movies of the last decade. It had a $900,000 budget, grossed $17 million, nearly 20 times its budget. And it's it's based on the story of Oscar Grant III, a 22-year-old black man who was shot and killed by an Oakland police officer on New Year's Day, 2009. Sadly, it's an incident that we've seen a lot of examples of in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And then the cop who, and it was caught on cell phone video, by the way, and presented to the media, and the cop who killed Grant ended up being convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Unfortunately, served not even a year in prison. But anyway, so Coogler, it turns out, his father was a big fan of the Rocky series and showed all the films to his son, and so for his second film, he approached Stallone about doing this, and Stallone agreed.
Right.
And it's not such as his second film, second feature directing. He had done some shorts prior to that as well. And of course, you and I both know shorts are a lot of work too.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
And sometimes even more work because you have small crews. So often, each individual will have so many tasks.
Absolutely on that. Yes.
And so anyway, then they issued a second trailer. Came out a couple of weeks ago, and the second trailer, it's. When you put that and the first one together, well, first of all, I think the first trailer makes more sense in context of the second. Once you've seen the second, you can understand the first better. And there's a little bit of common material between the two trailers, not much. And there's some common voiceovers that they have.
One of the things I did like about the second one is it showed a lot more of the relationship that Rocky and Creed have in the movie. And I think since it demonstrates that, yes, that relationship is going to be pivotal.
Oh, yes.
That didn't come across at all in the first trailer, where, okay, it looks like it's about Creed's son and Rocky's just there for the namesake, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, that since I am a fan of how relationships look and are built in movies, that's another reason, obviously, the second trailer would have affected me.
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely, and relationships for me too. I think that, for example, Up on High Ground, the TV series in St. Louis that I've co-written several episodes for. One of the things that draws me to that show is that it's very relationship based, and there are all kinds of relationships. You have teacher-student, friend-friend, sibling, boyfriend, girlfriend. It really all kinds of relationships are portrayed in there. And so it was a really rewarding series for me to write, because of all the opportunities I had to help develop these relationships. And so anyway, let me see. Okay, yeah, no, just for the sake of clarification, Ryan Coogler also co-wrote the screenplay. And even though Stallone does get credit as a producer for this one, he does not have a writing credit, making this the first Rocky that he did not write. And but anyway, so in this time we see that we find out that Adonis, or Donnie as Rocky calls him, he's had a troubled life, that he spent time in both foster care and in juvie, as he puts it, which for those in modern youth terminology, that means a juvenile detention center. That's a term that I only started noticing about 10 or 15 years ago. I never heard it when I was a kid. But anyway, and now we know that Mary Ann Creed, Apollo's widow, is a character in this movie, now played by Phylicia Rashad, having been played by Sylvia Meals in 2 and 4. And one thing we don't learn from the trailer is the nature of their relationship, or how much contact they've had over the years. To me, the most likely reasonable scenario is that maybe they'll say that in the aftermath of her husband's death, Mrs. Creed was too distraught to go through the ordeal of raising a son, so she, left him to care for others. We don't know, but but that's probably a reasonable guess. And so. And there's a scene in which, in trailer 2, in which she is trying to talk her son out of boxing, talking about how, even his father, her husband, the heavyweight champion of the world, she had to carry him up the stairs sometimes with all these injuries.
Right.
And of course, on top of that, he ended up getting killed in the ring. So you see, obviously, that I guess Mrs. Creed is going to be to Adonis what Adrian was to Rocky, as far as just trying to get him to stop,
Right.
And
I suppose you always need somebody to have that role, and if you're staying, since they're staying true to the Rocky series, that's probably where that fits in. And I actually think it fits in a little more so with a mother than a wife sometimes. I mean, and I don't want to detract from how a wife might feel, but if you have gotten involved with somebody who is a boxer, and that's what they do, it's just one of those things. I don't want to say you have to accept it, but you have to kind of take it as part and parcel.
Yeah.
And and I can see where that wouldn't translate. She wouldn't want to see her child do the same thing.
Oh yeah, and I think sometimes you just have to, as a wife, and this is one of the biggest problems that people have in their romantic relationships is, most of the time you don't no matter how much you think you do, a lot of times you really don't accept your partner for who he or she is. And I mean, that you see that with Adrian, for much of the series.
Right.
Even though Rocky, I mean, that's what he does it because that's what he boxes because that's what he does. That's who he is. That's how he deals with things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember, going back. This is another sport, but it's another sport that once in a great while kills a person, which is auto racing. You go back
Right.
when Dale Earnhardt Sr. was killed in 2001 in the Daytona 500. His son Dale Jr. raced 7 days later, and again, I'm sure. I've never heard Dale Jr. explain why he did that, but if I asked him, he would probably say that's who I am.
That's who I am. Yeah.
And I'm sure that was his way of dealing with his pain.
Right.
And
that's what his father would have expected.
Oh, I think so, yeah. And of course you see that auto racing is the sport more than any other where you see a lot of families
Right.
Involved. But and you see quite a bit in boxing too. A lot of famous boxers have sons who go into it as well. Or even Muhammad Ali with his daughter, Layla, became fairly well known in boxing as well. Probably the most famous female boxer of all time. But so obviously Apollo or Adonis, excuse me, feels like he has a legacy to live up to, and we don't get the full gist of it from the trailers. But the first one says there's more. It says your legacy is more than a name in the first trailer, and then the second trailer, it seems that apparently Adonis has not been using the name Creed for whatever reason. I noticed that on IMDb the character is listed as Adonis Johnson Creed. So maybe he started.
Johnson's the family that raised him, perhaps the foster family.
Could be, yeah. And then you see, I guess, his love interest in the movie. You see a girl about his age, saying something like it's part of your legacy. Use the name.
Right.
And then at the press conference, his opponent, that British heavily tattooed guy, makes some sort of abrasive comment that you're not a real Creed or something like that. And then you see the two almost fighting and have to be separated. So good to see another pre-conference press conference.
Right.
Scene.
I was going to say that was one of those familiar things to see.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
The use of the press conference.
Yeah, 3 is the only Rocky that doesn't have a press conference in it.
Yeah.
So and I think that would have been a classic scene, with the Rocky Clever press conference.
Oh my God.
Although the statue dedication scene was good enough.
Right.
So you see that obviously he has some identity issues, and of course from the shots of the fight where you see that he's wearing the red, white, and blue trunks that say Creed on the front. Obviously, by the end of the movie, he's accepted his father's identity, and we get a lot more of a sense from the second trailer, as you alluded to earlier, about the close relationship that forms between Rocky and Adonis.
Right, and just also the sense that this is going to be a Rocky movie, or not a Rocky movie, but one in the series, as opposed to just it's going to be about Adonis Creed, and Rocky's going to be there, so that we have the brand name to help get people in.
Yeah.
That's how you could have looked at it from the first trailer. With that second one, you get that good feel sense that yes, this is one in the series.
Yes, that's right. And so and also you see, I always say that in Rocky V, Stallone tried to bring the series full circle. He partly succeeded, but not all the way. And then I think he did all the way in 6. And then in Creed, I think you're going to see him go full circle even more. As that now Rocky has become almost like a Mickey character,
No, and what's great about that was the scene even in the second trailer where he's got Adonis chasing the chickens.
Yes, I was going to mention that later on. Yes,
Because I made a note of that. I said, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
And then I guess he must have caught it kind of quickly, because I think Rocky says something about...
chicken slowing down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you see, because the thing is, the tone of the two trailers is incredibly serious, so you do see at least there's a little humor in this one.
Well, yeah, and although serious, but I was going to say the tone of the first one struck me as dark.
Yeah.
As opposed to... you could see the seriousness with the second trailer, but you could also... it didn't feel like the whole thing was just morose and... I use the term dark, but you could see where there was more to it than just that darkness.
Yeah, you can. And, of course, obviously, Coogler is someone, I haven't seen Fruitvale Station. I've read about it. I know the synopsis. Obviously, based on the subject matter, you assume it's a pretty dark movie. And so, but yeah, I like what I saw of the chicken chasing scene, and of course that's another example of bringing the series full circle. And Stallone is 69 now, and Burgess Meredith, let's see, was born in 07. This first one came out, so Burgess Meredith was 69 when the first Rocky came out. So
Yeah.
And Stallone, I don't know if it's just me, and of course maybe they're trying to make him look older. I think he looks like I know it's been 9 years, but I think he looks like he's aged, quite a bit since.
Well, and I have no idea. I'd have to go look at Stallone pictures maybe on the internet. But Stallone himself may have actually done some aging simply because of the untimely death of his son.
I'm sure, yeah, that's
And as I think most people know, an emotional hit like that can affect how you look physically.
It can, yeah, and it's one of those things. And I'm not speculating on Stallone's situation per se, because I have no idea what kind of relationship he had with his son. Hopefully a good one, but I do know that very often when a child dies prematurely, a lot of times parents question themselves. I think one of the worst things people can do is overanalyze the past, as if, if I'd done this or this or this differently, maybe he would be alive today,
Right.
And I certainly hope that Sylvester hasn't been tormented by any thoughts, but I mean, and the thing is, a lot of times when parents think things like that, a lot of times there's nothing they could have done. Like, for example, and I understand that Sage's death was not a suicide, but I think one thing I've noticed, for example, people, I always say when a child commits suicide, that it's important to understand, first of all, the parents could have been the best parents in the world, and the child still committed suicide, So I think many times parents blame themselves for things for which they actually have nothing to do with.
And the ones who had something to do with it are the ones who aren't going to blame themselves, right?
That's the irony,
Yeah. So, but even if I'm just saying, even if he isn't thinking that he could have prevented it somehow or done something different, just the emotional toll from the grief can do that. So if Rocky Stallone looks older than maybe or aged more than maybe he would have, that could have something to do with it. And if necessary, you can actually attribute that to the character. Adrian had died, now Polly is deceased, so
which that's another thing we learn in the and we see, and I don't know what to make of this, but in the trailer we see around a soundbite in which Rocky says that everybody in his life has moved on, and then you see Polly's tombstone. He's buried next to Adrian, and we found out that Polly died in 2012, and which would have been 6 years after Rocky Balboa. And then you see a Rocky place a bottle of Four Roses bourbon on Polly's tombstone.
Right.
And I don't know if Four Roses was Polly's favorite or not, but
it also works. It's like putting flowers there.
But there's no clue about what happened to Rocky Jr. My guess the most logical thing, since apparently the character's not in the movie, is that maybe he moved to another part of the country to try to escape the shadow of his father, you know.
I'm hoping maybe we'll find out.
I hope so, yeah. But, you know, nevertheless, I mean, that certainly would add to him saying that he's alone, you know. And then, of course, we see that Adonis takes offense to that comment, saying that I'm here for you every day. And that, you know, so apparently Adonis feels slighted by that comment. And, of course, like we were talking about in past episodes, you know, that many times trainers and boxers have a father-son relationship, you know. And since Adonis never knew his father, you know, maybe he wants Rocky as a father figure, you know.
Yeah. And even just, no, I mean, he is there. They're, you know, they both have... I'm going to explore this a bit, that just from the trailers, they both have something in common in that regard. You know, Rocky feels like everybody has moved on, and Adonis felt, I'm going to use the term, abandoned for a while. So they both have that understanding of feeling lonely.
Oh, yes. And so obviously we see that they could fill a void with each other, and you know, there have been several clips. You know, if you go to the Creed Facebook page, they have a few 10 or 15-second clips of the movie as well that show them training together, and so, you know, and then obviously you find out that there is, you know, at some time, you know, in the film you see him yell Rocky's sick. Adonis yells that, and then you see Rocky lying in a hospital bed, and then later in a wheelchair, and you know, hopefully he makes a recovery in time to, you know, be in Adonis's corner for the climactic heavyweight title fight. You know, we don't know, but you know,
there has to be something there. There has to be questions left open in trailers, so get you to go.
So, you know, maybe Rocky will wake up in the hospital bed and says, "I just want you to do one thing." And Adonis says, "What's that?"
Win.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But one thing I did read from somebody on IMDb, who on one of the message boards, who claimed to have seen an advanced preview of this, or a screening or whatever, said that Duke is not seen nor mentioned in this movie. And to me, if that is the case, and of course it could be, and maybe it isn't, you know, and of course also it could be that, because sometimes these advanced screenings are to you know, test audiences about how they like certain things, and very often there's significant editing that takes place after these screenings, major editing in some cases, but you know, that they could add something about that later on, or it could be, like you said when we talked about this privately, it could be that there was a reference to Duke that this person missed.
Right.
But anyway, Duke, of course, he and Paulie and Stallone are the only people to appear. Duke, Rocky, and Paulie were the only characters to appear in all three movies. The commentator Stu Nahan appeared in the first 5, and then, you know, did a voiceover for the computer fight in part 6, and then but he's since died. But he was a real life sports commentator, by the way. But to me, if Duke is not even mentioned, if that is the case, that would be, I wouldn't say it would ruin the movie, but to me that would just be, you know, that would be a mistake, because, you know, of the relationship that we know he had with Apollo, that he was Apollo's trainer, and, you know, like, you know, he revealed to Rocky in 4, you know, Apollo was like my son, I raised him, and when he died, a part of me died, you know. So, you know, I would hope that they at least would make some mention of him, or what happened to him, or whatever, even if they're saying that he's dead, you know, but...
yeah.
So,
we will see.
Yeah, of course, we're glad to see that, you know, Rocky, despite his 9th grade education, that he's managed to successfully keep a restaurant open for 20 years now.
Yes.
Since, you know, it says in Rocky Balboa, the sign, all the Adrian signs had established 1995, and now here it is 2015, and it's still in business. So
right.
Apparently he picked up some business sense along the way, at least. And so after...
Or he's hired a good manager.
Yeah, unlike that guy who Polly signed a power of attorney to.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
He just knew not to give the business stuff to Polly.
So I'm glad at least after that happened, at least he rebounded to an extent, that he's now, running a successful business there in Philadelphia. And, so... Let's see. I'm trying to think if there are any other major points about the trailer. But yeah, you certainly hope there'll be a mention of Duke. And like I said, I think he might be the most underrated character of the series. I mean, he never had a big role in any of the six, but he had a little spark to all of them. And
Right.
I liked not only his passion, but that he was his paternal instinct. Toward first to Apollo and then to Rocky.
Right.
And. So, Rocky now, and like I said, he was said to be 30 years old in the first one, and Stallone now, Stallone was 30 when it came out, so, there aren't, I don't think there are a lot of athlete superstar fictional characters who would still make good characters in their late 60s.
Right.
I think this is one. Who does? Yeah.
And I think it's a lot. It's reasonable. It's a logical progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm going to say that if people accepted Mickey at his age as a trainer, there's no reason not to accept Rocky.
No, absolutely not. And like I said, he's a great character. He might not be the brightest guy, but he's street smart. He has a lot of wisdom and
a lot of heart.
Yeah, and I think another thing is that you see that they could be at a point in each man, Adonis and Rocky, be at a point in his life that they need each other, not only for their professional relationship, but for their personal relationship, if Rocky, assuming Rocky Jr. is no longer in the area and they don't see each other very often, and, who knows, Rocky Jr. could be married with a couple of kids and just,
Well,
it's hard for him to get across the country,
And one thing about Adonis, too, is I imagine that he feels a connection to his father through Rocky because Rocky and Apollo were pretty close.
And because, it was because of Apollo that Rocky got discovered,
Right.
Yeah, and the fact, and there is one thing that's interesting that, and of course we don't get a reaction shot to this in the first trailer, but where Adonis is pointing to that picture and says this is 10th round of the first fight, right? Now that's something only a super extreme zealous diehard fan would know,
Right.
And so that really says something about human nature, about how we all want to be proud of our fathers. I think one of the biggest problems that I think a lot of kids have these days when their fathers aren't around is, supposedly one of Mike Tyson's biggest problems is that he doesn't know who his father is. I think, so I think, and of course we all have this inherent need to feel that our fathers are proud of us. That's certainly something that's been a source of, that's been troubling for me in my life, feeling that my father wasn't proud of me. And it's something I've struggled with even well into my adulthood. And so, the fact that Adonis has studied these fights closely, that he instantly recognizes this picture, as being from the 10th round, you see that he is interested in his father, and,
And that was considering the situation, it was no doubt the only avenue he had to get to know him, by watching footage of these fights.
Of course, yes. And then, obviously there's some sort of, and this is something that's explored, in some way in Rocky Balboa, the 6th one, that obviously, one of the essential storylines was Rocky Jr. feeling his father's shadow. In this movie, you find out that Apollo, or that Adonis, it feels that he's in his father's shadow. And
what's interesting there by you saying that is, that's something that is not an unreasonable thought either.
No, it's not.
Especially because, okay, Apollo Creed is deceased, he's been gone, and even if Adonis doesn't think that, you know that other people are going to be expecting him to be just like his father.
Oh yes, and of course, one thing that we mentioned, of course, one thing about Rocky Balboa is that Rocky Jr. says he got, I've got my job because of my name, and of course, in Creed, apparently Adonis has been using another name because he's trying to hide from that shadow. So it takes the same, feeling about a shadow, but
right. But I mean, using the other name too for him, that way he knows he's getting wherever he's gotten because of his skill rather than because people like the idea of promoting a fight with Apollo Creed's son.
Oh yeah, and that's a point as well. Like I think a lot of people, don't realize, for example, that Emilio Estevez is Charlie Sheen's son, but
Martin Sheen's son.
Martin Sheen, Charlie's brother. Yeah, but Emilio decided he didn't want to make it, on his father's name, so he uses, and Estevez is the real family name, by the way. But nevertheless, I think that it's interesting that they're just putting a different angle on the thing about, the shadow of your father. The first guy is conscious about, Rocky Jr. is conscious about sharing his father's name, and then Adonis is avoiding, at least at first, his father's name.
Right. And we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
So you and I are going to go see that movie.
Yeah, I can't wait, the day before Thanksgiving, November 25th. That's why, that's one of the first things, this just shows you where my mindset is. One of the first things I realized yesterday, when I looked down at my phone and saw the date October 1st, it's like, that means that Creed comes out next month. So, because I've been waiting a year and a half for it, so now, we realize that the wait is,
the time is drawing near, and yes, we will be there, and you'll get to hear what we have to say about that too.
Yeah, we will. And a couple of other thoughts before we sign off for this supplement. I've been trying to think. I heard somebody say that it was one of these other Creed trailer reviews said that Stallone was quoted. USA Today, maybe, I'm not sure, but saying that this is not Rocky 7, this is Creed 1. And some people are calling this a sequel to the Rocky series. Some people are calling it a spin-off. And I can see, it seems like it's going to be a little bit of both, because obviously there is a lot of continuity from the past Rocky movies. So it's at least a sequel to some extent, even if it's not a full-fledged sequel. I mean, obviously we got the update about Polly and all kinds of references to the first 6 movies. I mean, in the 2 trailers, I've seen explicit references to all of the previous 6, except of course Rocky 5.
Right.
And so Coogler, obviously a very big fan of the series, but I'm trying to think that we see spin-offs all the time of TV shows, all the time.
Oh, yes.
Some are very successful, some are bombs, some in between. But how often over the years have we ever seen movie spin-offs? I can't think of very many. It seems like it's been, to me, it seems like it's been very rare.
Yeah, I can't think of one offhand.
The only one I can think of right off is actually, it's a new one. It's the Minions. That they started off as supporting characters in the Despicable Me movies. And I only know this because my son is an obsessed fan. And then the Minions merchandising became so big they decided to just make the Minions movie by itself. So that, I guess that would be a spin-off.
Okay.
But, you go back, for example, I guess starting in the 70s, it seemed like every Norman Lear sitcom had at least one spin-off.
Right.
And sometimes 2.
Right. And spin-offs of spin-offs.
Yes. Yes.
And very seldom did you ever see the characters again, or mentioned, for that matter. Once they had their own show.
Yeah.
You didn't really see them interact or even think of the other people.
Yeah, I got one semi-exception on Dallas into Knots Landing. Gary Ewing, who was he and Val moved from Dallas to Knots Landing.
Right. They went back and visited when JR was shot. I know that.
Yeah, they had, Gary and Val made a few guest appearances, and then Dallas characters also on Knots Landing a few times over the years. which all ended when they did the retcon to bring Bobby back to life, and they stopped it after that.
Oh boy. We're not going to go there.
Yeah, you can look that up on Wikipedia if you're not familiar with the story.
We'll talk about that if we ever see anything in the series where all of a sudden Apollo Creed is alive or something. But
yeah, and in fact, actually, that's one thing I read on the IMDb trivia, that Carl Weathers actually wanted. He asked Stallone to put him in Rocky Balboa in a non-flashback scene, and that Stallone wouldn't do it. I can't imagine that Weathers would do that.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way, you know. I mean, I think it would be ridiculous, you know, unless you're going to say like it's his twin brother or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the twin brother thing has been done a few too many times, though.
Usually on soap operas.
Yeah, among other places, yeah, but of course, that's one thing one of the top movie cliches that I've read is that in every pair of identical twins, one is evil. And which is true. I can't think of any identical twins in movies where they were both good. I mean, I can't say there's never been one. I just don't remember.
I'm sure there have.
But the evil twin brother thing is pretty cliche, though.
Right, absolutely.
But let's see. So, yeah, this is obviously a. I guess this is I would call this and of course I might have a different reaction when I see the movie. Mm-hmm. But right now, this looks to me like it's a sequel / spin-off. Yeah. That it's because Stallone and Jordan seem to have about an equal part in it, and obviously, if you look at the trailers, you see there's a lot of scenes that obviously Rocky will not be in.
Right.
A lot of references to black culture. And I'm not putting that down. That's just an observation. But and I think because of that, though, I think this film has a chance to reach a lot of people that it wouldn't if it were coming out as Rocky 7.
Right. Yeah.
And because Coogler obviously starting to have something of a cult following because of Fruitvale Station. Okay. And this obviously would, help him get, more into the mainstream. And I think, Stallone is a guy really who hasn't gotten, since the first Rocky, which won Best Picture and, had 10 Oscar nominations. Since then, Stallone really has not done that well with critics. He's done better in recent years, starting with Rocky Balboa again,
right.
But I think Ryan Coogler being involved in this, I think will, the critics will go in with higher expectations.
Again, we'll have to see.
Yeah. But, I think when I first saw that Stallone had nothing to do with writing this, I was disappointed. But at the same time, I noticed that with, starting with Rocky Balboa, he's gotten a lot more conscious about the quality of films that he's made. And I think, now that he's in the twilight of his career, we think, maybe he's
maybe
not, but in the event that he is, and obviously his son's death certainly is a reminder that, nobody lives forever, but, and that, that's often later than we think, but, I think that he's thinking more about making films of substance, making films that really say something rather than films that just entertain people, and, because even in that last Rambo movie in 2008, while it was an extremely violent and sometimes disturbing film, it also was trying to make statements. Like one of the most fundamental things the movie was trying to say is that everybody has to have a reason to live, and that, you have to face your demons, And so, and you can see that, obviously, this is not going to be a shallow movie, Will it be as good or, not as good as the previous Rocky films? We don't know.
We don't know.
But I don't think it's going to be some shallow piece of garbage. I think I feel pretty certain, about that. And then, I think Stallone, he made, one of the reasons that he made Rocky Balboa after a 16-year absence of the character and the series was that he, didn't like Rocky V as an end to the series. And I believe that after he redeemed himself, he got the best critical response from Rocky Balboa that he'd gotten in any in the series since the first one. I don't think he would do the. I don't think he would do this if he didn't feel like it was going to be a worthy addition to the Rocky legacy. You know, I don't think when he's on the edge of 70 that he's going to do something that he thinks would sully the series.
Oh, I agree.
So, other than that, you know, you know, like I said, I remember when I walked out of the theater after Rocky V, I was very emotional because I thought that was it, you know, and I saw it the Saturday, the weekend it came out, 25 years ago next month, and who would have believed that a quarter century later, you know, we're going to have Stallone still playing the character, you know, and you know, hopefully it won't be the last time, but if it is, hopefully, you know, it'll go out in style. And you know, I guess the thing is, you know, we don't know that Rocky doesn't die in this film, you know.
Okay.
And, we don't know that he doesn't. I hope not, but
okay, let's. Guess we'll find out. Yeah. I keep saying that. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, and hopefully it doesn't happen. But you know, I don't think it will. Like I said, I think the character will be alive as long as Stallone is alive, and then you know if they make more. And of course, one thing about making this, you know, calling this Creed instead of Rocky 7 is that if this film is a success, then it would be easier to, you know, make future sequels, you know, whether Stallone is alive or whether he wants to do it or not.
Right.
And of course, hopefully he will. It'd be great to see him back, you know, again, and good to see him, you know, and see if he becomes a cranky old man like Mickey did.
Oh dear. I don't know if he has that in him.
No, but you know, we do see, you know, of course, back in Rocky V, he said he wasn't a manager, so now, you know, I guess we find out that 25 years later he could be a manager after all.
He could.
And hopefully for, you know, since Adonis has this complex about being in his father's shadow, hopefully the press won't describe him as, you know, Rocky's robot or the Clone Ranger.
Oh no, yeah. I'm sure he'll develop a whole list of his own nicknames.
Yeah, like his dad did.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the introduction for the Drago fight.
Right.
But yeah, that was one of my favorite bad lines from Rocky V. Is something like, "I ain't no damn robot," from Tommy Gunn.
Right.
So anyway, we look forward to it, and gosh, we're 47 minutes now, so we've talked for almost 10 times as long as the two trailers are combined. So
yeah, so
maybe I should have called this episode 11 instead of supplement 1, but because this is actually longer than some of my episodes, but of movies. But
so the question will remain: was this a supplement or episode 11?
Yeah. So do you have any last words before we go off the air?
That was it.
Okay. Well, so in conclusion, this is October 2nd, 2010, and let's see, so we've got about 7 weeks or so until, let's see, 29 plus 54 days until Creed comes out, and I hope to see you all at the theaters, or we'll be there probably on opening day, and
yeah, and if you are in Indianapolis and want to join us at the theater.
Yeah, well, we're not sure which theater yet. We'll be sure to tell you in plenty of time. But you know, we wish we could, like, you know, set up there in the lobby and actually do an episode there in the theater. But of course, I know we will do an episode on Creed when we both feel like we're familiar with it. I don't know if that'll be during its theatrical release or more likely after it comes out on DVD, because I think I need to see a film at least 2 or 3 times, if not more, to really be able to give it a proper analysis. But so anyway, this concludes our preview of Creed. I hope you'll go back if you haven't done so already, if you have about 10 hours of your life to kill, and watch our first 6 episodes in which we go through the first 6 Rocky movies. And so till next time, whenever we're back with our next episode, I don't know what it'll be or when it'll be, but I'm sure it'll be in the next week or 2. And I've got lots more movies on the back burner. You know, episodes with Michelle, with, you know, at least one other guest host, and, you know, probably some more solo as well. So I'll see you soon. Until then, for Super Deep Movie Analysis, this is Lec Zorn and Michelle Gussow. Good night.